Strong here talking to George Fitzgerald.
How's it going?
And George has written a couple of books, really acclaimed books.
That's right.
And now he's moving on to the world of documentary film.
That's right.
And he wants to talk about his new documentary, which is about the history of Dublin. Yeah,
well, it's more to do with the history of Dublin, but it does come around the history of Dublin. What we are doing is we're also going to be looking at what the Irish were experiencing in New York.
Yes.
During that period, well, prior to that period, and we're looking at what the catalyst was to set it all off.
Okay.
Because we went from medieval Dublin, which was a horrific time. I'll do a brief thing on that.
Okay.
And then we went into a place when Georgian Dublin was around. It was the second biggest city, I think, in the British Empire, right? And it was a very flamboyant city. You had a thing called the White Street Commission that was involved, where the streets became wider, the Georgian houses. So you had a lot of gentry living in Dublin at that particular time. And then you went from that period to being called the city with the worst slums in Europe.
Okay. Yeah, and that's where your story
takes up there. Right. What was the catalyst that set that off? And what was the formation of every single thing that aligned itself up to be called, to be branded such a name? You know, at that particular time, you have to understand as well, is that you had Whitechapel in London.
Right, yes.
Where Jack the Ripper was.
Yeah.
And we were the worst ones in Europe.
Oh my God, yeah. When you think of it like that, yeah.
Exactly.
And what would you think now from your research? What would have been the catalyst in your opinion?
My personal opinion was from my experience where I've studied, is that the Act of Union, right, in 1801, where the Parliament was basically vanished, right, and it was the gentry then fled to London, fled to England. They left suburbia, or the outskirts of, they fled to suburbia, but they left the outskirts of inner city Dublin, which would have been Gardiner Street, Shannon Street, Mountjoy Square. If you can imagine sort of like 1801 Mountjoy Square, for example, and all those Georgian buildings brand new.
Yes.
You sort of get that image of, do you remember that scene in Oliver, where he starts singing, "Who will buy a London?" Remember that scene?
I do indeed, yeah. Brilliant movie, yeah.
You can see that scene up there.
Yeah, you
in
can
1800.
Walking back in time, kind of, aren't you?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they all fled.
Right.
So really, at that particular time, the land was being prepared for the people that was coming.
Okay.
But the famine then prepared the people for the land.
Right.
Because there was limited choices. They either escaped aboard a coffin ship, headed towards the 5 Points in New York, right, which is the worst slum in American history, which is Irish.
That's the Irish background, yeah.
Exactly. Or they ended up going to Whitechapel in London, or then they ended up going to Dublin.
Yes, okay. So, I mean, what you would have studied then, would it have brought you just on the north side of the city, or would you have looked on the south side as well? Or have you concentrated more on the north side? No,
it's all encapsulated in one within each other, because Dublin itself originally really was over in the Liberties, in the Middle Ages. It was really involved with all that stuff that was going on there. And it branched out, of course. So really its origin is around the south side. Where with Ringsend, you had a lot of boatmen down there. A lot of dockers.
That's right,
And it was all very clannish.
Yes.
Very clannish down there with the boaters and the dockers, and you'd stevedores coming from that particular area. But then we spring across to one of the most notorious areas Dublin had would be across the Liffey, not too far in the centre, maybe Flintstone over, would be the Montauk.
Yes.
Right, where you had supposedly different figures, any given night between 1845 to 1923, I think it was, you know, 1800 prostitutes walking the Montauk. Whether them figures are right, I don't know, because if you actually walk along the Montauk, it's not a very big place, and like, there's basically 5 streets there that would have walked up, so I don't know where it fit 1800.